Shalom. It's always weird to say Shabbat Shalom, and you're expecting hundreds of people to say Shabbat Shalom back, but such as it is. Well, it's great to see everyone. Shabbat Shalom. Happy Hanukkah. I did pull out my Hanukkah tie. It's a little less loud than my Hanukkah suit that I was sporting the other day. And hope it's nice and warm where you are. We're welcoming people from some warmer places. Here it's a nice real field temperature of 37, but I'm looking out my window and we have Tat Shabbat going on the courtyard in person. Everyone is in their own little box and wearing masks, so it's very safe. So Shabbat Shalom and happy Hanukkah. Mazel Tov to the Caparellis, and it's wonderful to be together on this very special Shabbat. As a teenager, I loved the classic science fiction TV shows like Star Trek. I hope you can see this. Here's my Star Trek 25 years pin. And I love the Twilight Zone as well. I remember countless late nights glued to the TV, listening to Rod Serling open the show. It is a dimension as vast as space and as timeless as infinity. I'm really not doing a good Rod Serling, but you'll bear with it. It is the middle ground between light and shadow. I could get a cigarette, but that wouldn't be appropriate for these days. Between science and superstition. And it lies between the pit of man's fears and the summit of his knowledge. This is the dimension of imagination. It is an area which we call the Twilight Zone. Its episodes were clever and engaging. Imagine a world where the beauty standards were reversed and what we think of as ugly and disfigured is the normative standard, and someone whom we think of as gorgeous is deemed horrific. I don't know if you remember that episode. Or the classic episode of the Odyssey of Flight 33, where a plane somehow gets sucked into a time vortex, and instead of being in the year 1961 when they took off, it is the year 1940. And there's no runway long enough to land on, and there's no way to get back to the future. You could see where later movie writers, like in the year 1985, like Robert Zemeckis and Bob Gale, found their inspiration. This was a show that pushed the limits of our imagination, and like all great literature, allowed for the willing suspension of disbelief, as the great philosopher Aristotle first explained it. This allows for the audience watching a play or reading a novel or seeing a show or a movie to enter into a space where we can kind of leave reality behind and enjoy the stimulation of the art. Thus, time travel and other things are not real, at least as far as we now know, but they can be experienced in this art form. We leave behind the normative reality for a short period of time to feel catharsis and emotional release. Well, for the last 9 months, we have been living in a twilight zone. There have been many days when I have woken up thinking that this was some kind of dream or nightmare, that this was not real, that this has not been happening. I've been confused about time. I did not used to forget what day it is, but now I need to ask more and more, is it Wednesday, Tuesday, Thursday? All the long days of Zoom just blend into each other. It's as if the absence of personal contact and actually being physically close to people has dulled some of my senses and actually disconnected me from time. This entire experience of this pandemic feels like a week and like a decade all at once. It is surreal. As most of us just celebrated Thanksgiving alone or with the people in our own homes or just those in our bubbles or maybe with a few on Zoom, we realize that we are not inhabiting normal space and time. It is the Twilight Zone. But it is not fake. It is not a hoax. It is real. Sadly, very real. Every day this past week, about 3,000 people died from this pandemic in the United States alone. That's a 9/11 every single day. And it's going to continue. The winter will be filled with more of the same. Somehow, there are people who think this is not real. Even a few who are in the hospital with COVID-19, and they even think it is fake. What can we say? As Joe reminded us in his thoughtful Dvar Torah, on Hanukkah, we light our Chanukiot. You can see them on my tie. They're just very small. We light our Hanukkah menorahs, each night adding another candle, another flame. Now, for the last 25 years, I've been teaching 7th graders and their parents about Hanukkah and holding a very fun debate, what I call the Hillel Shammai debate. We held ours in 7th grade this past Sunday. You see, Hillel and Shammai were great Jewish leaders who lived about 2,000 years ago, around the same time as another famous Jew, Jesus. Hillel and Shammai had great debates, hundreds. And this one was about how to light the Hanukkah candles. As a logical person, not too different from Spock, although more emotional, Shammai said we should light all 8 candles on the first night and then count down. So each night would have 1 fewer candle. This made perfect sense. If the oil lasted 8 days, is this right? Yeah, there we go. 8 days. Then each day there was an 8th less. So light 1/8 fewer candles and count down till you get to the last candle. Shammai had another argument in his favor. He had history. You see, the Jews had missed their autumnal festival, harvest festival of Sukkot, since the Syrian Greek army had defiled the Jewish temple by placing idols and even a pig in it. And the Jews were pretty bummed about missing Sukkot. It was, and still is, Hechag, the holiday, par excellence, the most joyous. They wanted to celebrate it. So they decided, all right, we'll just celebrate it a couple of months late. And it was actually 8 days. Since Sukkot is 7 days, plus there's this 8th bonus day called Shmini Atzeret. So there's 8 days to celebrate. And that's the historical explanation of how we got an 8-day holiday when usually we prefer 7. By the way, we know this from the book of Maccabees, which, while it didn't make the cut into the Hebrew Bible, was preserved in Greek by the Catholic Church, even though it was written in Hebrew originally. And that's how we have it today. Pretty cool. And another factor supporting our friend Shammai is that the Torah says that the number of sacrifices on Sukkot goes down each day of the festival. So having the candles diminish makes total sense. Now, even though he does not have the history, He does not have logic or the Torah on his side. Somehow, Hillel wins the debate. Why? Well, Hillel has something else going for him. He has a slightly better worldview. You see, Hillel's counting up was a reminder that each day the oil still burned was a greater miracle than the day before. And beyond the story of Hanukkah, Hillel was pointing us to a greater truth, marbim b'simcha, that we need to try to increase our joy. We need to grow the small sparks of light wherever and whenever we find them. As the great philosopher and teacher who I had the chance to study with in Jerusalem, Rabbi David Hartman, may his memory be for a blessing, taught, quote, "The miracle of the first day was expressed in the community's willingness to light a small cruse of oil without reasonable assurance that their efforts would be sufficient to complete the rededication of the temple. The miracle of Jewish spiritual survival throughout history may be best described by our people's strength to live without guarantees of success and to focus on how to begin a process without knowledge of how exactly it will end." And since then, we have continued to follow in that vein, to follow Hillel when we light our lights, especially during this time, this twilight zone time in which we inhabit. We need to gather up the sparks of light amidst all of this darkness. And yes, they are there when we just look around for them. That's why we light according to Hillel, because each night we want to increase the light. Similarly, we want to look around us at this dark time of the year and gather together all the sparks into a larger flame that can illuminate the darkness to bring us all hope. This week, we saw the vaccine administered to the first people in the United Kingdom. And watching that video of those people and listening to the interviews with the nurses, I was filled with emotion, with tears. After these surreal 9 months, there is now light at the end of the tunnel. Instead of 4 years, the fastest timeline a vaccine has ever been produced, somehow, miraculously, science has produced one in under a year. A modern Hanukkah miracle, if ever there was one. We're not out of the woods yet. With thousands of people dying each day, we need to be vigilant. This will be the longest winter, as we predicted. But yet, to know that there is an end, to know that maybe, just maybe, by next summer, or next fall, life will return to some degree of normalcy. That gives us hope. That means a lot. So I've started to think about the future again. I've started to plan again, to think of shul trips in 2022 to Israel, to Abu Dhabi, with whom Israel signed a recent peace accord, a shul trip to Spain and Morocco, of an amazing shul-wide multi-generational retreat, to just think of giving each other a hug again, or just coming back to shul on Shabbat and sharing Kiddush again. I don't know if I could get through this. Never will I take those things for granted. Excuse me. But now, each night, I'm starting to light more candles, and I'm feeling more hope. Hillel's 2,000-year-old teaching has helped us endure many, many difficult times over the last 2 millennia. Hate, violence, wars, the Holocaust, and now this. And now we see the lights increasing. May they only grow. Shabbat Shalom and happy Hanukkah.